but Stephen, you pick up on the other points.
Yes, thanks, Chair. When we worked through the impact assessment exercise, and it's appreciated that the LOIP's quite a strategic high-level document, so when we're working through all the impacts, there was a feeling that it was the next level down in terms of the key actions that we would need to know before we could actually make an assessment. So it was a broad impact assessment that was done on the strategic document, but that's where it came to say, well, look, we really need to know what the very localised actions are going to be, and then further impact assess what those actions will have on our local communities. And that was, it was quite a fluid discussion, and it was something that was recommended through Public Health Scotland and other colleagues, and it was felt that that was the way forward. So it's almost a step two, and we're not there yet. We're still just working through the detail of the action plan.
Happy with that response, Katie? Good, thumbs up. Yeah. Oh, it wasn't thumbs up. It is now. Excellent. Okay, I've got Dawn and Joe in the room, and then we'll go back to members online in the order they've indicated.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add really to Nick's comments, to thank everybody who's participated in this process to develop the LOIP, and the senior leadership team, the senior leadership group that represents key agencies, you know, have been the, you know, really a driving force in bringing this forward. So thank you to everybody, and for Stephen for facilitating. And I think what's really refreshing in this LOIP and the approach has been the intentions around embedding the locality element. And I think, you know, as a board, we'll be really keen to see how that really influences the action planning and the work moving forward, and how we can determine the impact of all of this action in different communities and for different parts of the region. So I'll be really interested to see how that develops. And the second thing is just to mention the workshops, because that was really valuable discussion. You know, for those who weren't involved, many of us were, the involvement in workshops to really explore and have a deep dive into some of those key issues where, you know, there's an opportunity for partners to come together differently and work together differently and prioritise differently to make a difference, because that's what we're all here to do. And the workshop approach that enabled us to have different types of conversations was really valuable. So I would just be an advocate for that kind of approach moving forward, so that we can have more informal discussion about some of the really tricky, wicked issues that the region faces, and that we can really explore what our respective roles are in relation to tackling that and prioritise where we need to. So really welcome the LOIP as it is in front of us. Thank the team, Stephen and others who have facilitated this whole process. Really looking forward to seeing how the locality element is really embedded and reflected in how we determine impact and outcome, as well as the defining of the actions needed locally. And let's have more informal discussion, collaborative working through workshops and other means. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Dawn. Joe?
This might be getting into the detail, morning everybody, a bit too early, but it was about the digital under priority 3 or theme 3, where we live, capitalise on opportunities to collaborate digitally and eliminate digital exclusion. It was just to make sure that this is taking, that reads as though that's our direction of travel, whereas in fact our research was clear that there's something like, I can't remember the percentage, so please don't quote me on it, 20% of those who we engage with do not want to engage. 40% do not want to engage digitally, so we have to make sure that while we need to expand our digital offer, we also make that is backed up by the offer to communicate non-digitally, where people, or where some of the issues around literacy and numeracy and reading and writing are disenfranchising people, that we don't just focus on the digital. And I'm sure that's getting into the detail that you'll get into the action plan, Stephen.
Thanks very much for that, Joe, and absolutely, well, Stephen will capture that and we'll make sure that there's other options available. So moving to members online, I've got John Campbell followed by Norma.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, a lot of work's gone into this, so congratulations on those who put it together. My issue at the moment is, well, it's not an issue, but it's a concern, is paragraph 3.5 on page 19, where it says the following consideration in the data intelligence, it can create inequality in certain geographical areas. Now, we've got a list of bullet points there, Lochside, including all the way down to Stranraer West. However, if you take those out of the equation, what happens to the rest of the rural area of Dumfries and Galloway? I mean, there is one bullet point there, which is up in Nistdale, which could cover anything from Thornhill all the way up to Sanquhar or even beyond. So my plea is, how does the rest of the rural Dumfries and Galloway fit in? You know, because there is inequalities even in our rural settings and not just in the bigger areas. Thanks.
Thanks for that, John. Stephen, have you captured that?
Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor Campbell. That's really helpful. The exercise we went through was involving Public Health Scotland and looking at all the kind of data sets, not just SIM data as well. And the Community Empowerment Act requires you to break down the region into smaller areas and have a set of locality plans. So these were the initial areas that the stats and the data were telling us, but that doesn't exclude from the fact that there's significant rural deprivation in other areas. And, you know, that's certainly, and there's a lot of work going on through the breadth of community planning partners to address that. So just because it's not featured here doesn't mean that, you know, there won't be a focus through community plan. It's just that these were the initial areas that came up from that data set.
So will we be able to see something maybe in the future on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Sorry, Gail, have you asked me to speak?
Yeah, sorry, we had a bit of feedback there. I got a slight panic on. So I'll turn to Norma and then Linda. Thank you.
Okay, sympathise with the challenges, the tech challenges. So I just wanted to reassure new members to the board about the importance of narrative and case studies to the way the LOIP works. The key to all of that is the role of the locality hubs, which are part of the community planning framework and critical to the LOIP delivery. The locality hubs, just in case you're not aware, and I know most colleagues will know this, they are unique multi-agency platforms, 4 of them, 1 for each district across the region, made up of locally based representatives from the Council, Health and Social Care Partnership, South of Scotland Enterprise and ourselves. So specifically with the Council, it's the ward officers and ward managers and so on. For ourselves, it's our community engagement team. And these groups are charged with addressing community need locally and doing it in the context of the LOIP. And you will get annual reports back from them. But just to add to that and to pick up Don's point of the importance of workshop working, we have a joint workshop of the locality hubs planned for the 13th of September, where we'll be coming together to just to affirm their place in the community planning framework, and we're going to develop some values. We're going to talk about case studies. We're going to talk about the differences that locality hubs are making to individuals as well as local organisations. It's also going to be about the impact and difference they've made to the lives of individuals who who have benefited from the work of the locality hubs. So there will be stories coming out of the workshop, there will be values, and all of that, I think, will feed well into the Community Planning Partnership Board when we come to report. So it's good news, Gail.
Thanks very much, Norma. I love good news. Stephen.
Nothing really to add on what Norma said, just to support it and the critical role of locality hubs, and we're looking forward to the workshop that Norma mentioned in a few weeks' time, definitely.
And who attends the workshop? Sorry, just for my information.
Yep, so it's going to be a range
Sorry, Steve. Well, it's all the people who are involved in the locality hubs, and each one has, it depends on the number of ward managers and ward officers and so on, but we're anticipating somewhere between 25 and 30 people at the region-wide workshop on the 13th. So a good number.
Brilliant, good, excellent. I've got Linda and then Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Again, to echo what other people have said, what a fantastic report, what a great bit of work. So well done, everybody. I think sometimes you don't give enough praise to the hard work that staff do across Dumfries and Galloway. Can I bring people's attention to page 29, page 8 of the actual report? It's the evaluation of the anti-poverty strategy, which I think is great, and development of future arrangements for tackling poverty and inequalities. I was spoken about when we're doing this, that we do a lot of consultation with people. And can I be a bit of an advocate for individuals who don't actually engage in a great deal of consultation, and in terms of evaluating poverty and inequalities, play a massive part in that, and that is individuals with substance misuse and alcohol misuse issues. We've heard in the past few weeks that alcohol deaths are the highest ever in 10 years across Scotland, which is appalling. And drug deaths have gone down slightly, but the highest in the whole of Northern Europe, which is not great news for Scotland. I was at the Nisteel Divisional Licensing Board yesterday, where a really good report from NHS D&G about an assessment of over-provision in Dumfries and Galloway in 2023. I will reshare it, and you can have a look at it if you want. It was really useful. Nothing to do with this, but in terms of how we as a council can look at things, the information didn't give us enough information to say we can reduce either off licences or licensed premises. However, it's really telling. Some of the information that they gave us was findings for Scotland confirmed hospitalisation rates and deaths from alcohol-related illness are the highest in areas with the highest density of alcohol retailers. Additionally, the following findings were reported for Dumfries and Galloway. Alcohol-related hospitalisation rates in the neighbourhoods with the most alcohol outlets were 2.3 times higher than the neighbourhoods with the least. Just one of the examples. I would just say if we give some consideration to trying to engage with service users who have addiction issues, because we very often talk to professionals, which is great because they have a lot of input, but we very seldom talk to those who are suffering from the issues. And I think looking at anti-poverty strategies and issues there, it's very important to get their perspective. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Linda, and very clear and good observations. Stephen, maybe you want to pick up on a couple of the points, and I'm looking to Jeff to my right for perhaps a health perspective.
Thanks, Chair. Really critical points, Councillor Dorwood. And as part of the refresh of the LOIP, what we've done, we've integrated now the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership into the community planning model. And we're hoping to have a more detailed discussion around some of these key emerging issues at our December meeting. So it's very much one of the priorities, and it's going to feature as part of our LOIP action plan as well. But perhaps I can just hand over to Jeff, who maybe has a few other detailed comments to make.
Thanks, Chair. It runs as a common thread through so much of what we're doing here, and I'm conscious we've got the Director of Public Health report later, in which there are statistics around early deaths, in which liver cirrhosis, drug dependency play a considerable part. Clearly, this group, I think, has to align its approach with both the partner agencies of health and the council in particular, the police, but also with the Alcohol and Drug Partnership and the Public Protection Committee as well, where we're trying to address all of the avoidable harms that our vulnerable citizens can experience. So it's really about aligning the work, I think, and making sure that we're not trying to do a multitude of different objectives across a multitude of different committees, all slightly overlapping or working against each other. We've got to have a clarity of our top half a dozen interventions and make sure that all of our structures, be that ADP, CPP, Public Protection Committee, and the individual agencies, are clear on those limited number of priorities and have work plans that will deliver progress and measurable progress against them. So I think we need to declutter this agenda and actually focus on the high impact things that we can do and make sure that our multiple resources that are looking at this are all completely aligned around those limited number of key objectives with measurable performance milestones, so that we can demonstrate and assure you of delivery.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Nick, do you want to come in at this point as well?
Thanks very much. Just had a couple of other context issues. The report that was sent to the Licensing Authority was reviewed by the Public Health Committee of the Board just about a month ago, in part of its approval to get it submitted to the Licensing Board. And we were clear to understand the connection between over-provision of access to alcohol through either retailers or through licensed premises, and the link with over-use of alcohol by population. So we clearly wanted the Licensing Board to take that on board in future consideration of licenses and issuing licensing. I think the challenge from Linda about lived experience, I think, is very important. We've been doing some work with the Drug and Alcohol Partnership recently about how to make sure we can celebrate some of the stories of the success that takes place when the workers have interventions with people with significant drug or substance misuse problems and also alcohol problems, and also tackle the stigma that occurs across society for the people who have been through those sorts of life experiences, many of whom can actually develop meaningful and active participation in communities if it wasn't for the fact that stigma often gets in the way of their future employability. And I think one of the challenges we'll have to bring into our action planning within the LOIP is if we really want to reduce some of the impact of the demographic changes in this area, we need to be considering those sorts of populations as our future workforce, or parts of our future workforce, in order to capitalise on their human potential, and obviously therefore also give them some positivity in their working lives and help them to thrive. So I think that's important. So that's really just my comment, just to pick. I think Linda's right to highlight those issues.
Thanks very much for that, all of you. Linda, are you fairly comfortable with the responses you've got?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, more than comfortable. That's a really positive response. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, and then Norma.
Thanks, Linda. I'll be brief. A really interesting discussion and some good challenging questions. I really welcome the positive comments in terms of the development of the new LOIP, and particularly, I guess, for the new members on the call. This is a significant shift from where we were, and I think, as has been stated, I recognise the real multi-agency approach that we've taken here, that was premised on identifying areas of most need across our region, and putting in place new arrangements, a new framework that adds significant change and adds value as a consequence of that true multi-agency approach. And I think the LOIP and the action plans that we've talked about will very much reflect that. So it's been a long journey to get us to where we've got to, but I think we've got a really solid platform to move forward on. I think what the senior leadership team, and I'll discuss with Stephen after the meeting, may wish to consider, thinking about the range of questions that we've had on the call, as an offer to attend either individual management teams across any of the multi-agency groups and or political groups, where we can go and give some further insight and information, raise the profile and understanding of the community planning partnership and indeed the development of the LOIP and the work that we've done, because I think just sensing the questions that are coming through, I think there's something that we should be pretty bold about championing and shouting about here, that we've put in place a framework and a platform whereby I think we can now push forward together in that multi-agency approach and make a real difference. So through you, Chair, with your blessing, we'll have that discussion with the senior leadership team. Thank you.
That's great, Richard. Thanks very much. Norma, and then John in the room.
Yeah. I just wanted to build on the point that Nick made regarding the alcohol drug partnership. He slightly beat me to it, but I think it's important to note that the recent decision to include the alcohol drug partnership in the community planning partnership is a positive move, because it will allowing for that closer communication that's already been referred to. It would be important, I think, to emphasise that Penny Halliday, who's the chair of the Alcohol and Drug Partnership, has been very clear about her commitment to involving people with lived experience in all the work of the ADP. And I was at a major event a couple of months ago, at the beginning of the summer, where at the Baptist Church, where there were people with lived experience involved. This was a strategy development event. Just to reassure board members that people with lived experience are being included and will continue to be included. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Norma. John?
Yeah, thank you. I think your colleagues previously have stated lots of really good points, but I think the piece of work has been done, and it's a very good piece of work in the document. I suppose my question is, how do we now get this document out to our communities to make sure that we're engaging, and Rich started on that process, but how do we as partners and how do we as a community planning board get the message out? Here is the document, here are our priorities collectively, and how do we build on that and make sure that we have engagement both ways? And Linda made comment about hard to reach, and I think that is one that we do need to concentrate on. And how do we make sure that everyone has access, not necessarily wanting to pick it up, but have access to be able to read? And Dawn talked about the workshops. I think we can't underestimate the work that was done in that morning round the table over coffee. It was significant.
Thanks for that. John, do you want to pick up on the communications?
No, definitely not. It's critical that a document doesn't sit on the shelf, and we need to get word out now. And certainly, I'll start a communications plan for the senior leadership team to consider that can. We spoke about workshops. Getting out there in communities, as well as yes, we've got our own line, but like you say, that's not going to reach the hardest to reach. So I think it's about using our community contacts, which is the grid, particularly through third sector Dumfries and Galloway, in terms of the links they've got into the heart of communities as well. So we'll work something up, and we'll make sure we get word out appropriately. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Stephen. I'm not seeing any other members indicating. Richard, do you want to come in?
Just a very quick comment, Chair, just in addition to Stephen's comments. I think it's important to note that we've got obviously a number of thematic groups that are established, and it's really important that through the senior leadership team we influence and shape the work that those thematic groups are doing to reflect the key areas of priority that we've identified through this piece of work, and to ensure that that's a community-led piece of work in terms of the actions that we'll deliver on. As Norma said, the role of those locality hubs, and the reason why we're having the session in 2 weeks' time is very much to drive that agenda and get the message out, and make sure that from a multi-agency perspective, in terms of frontline community delivery is critical. So in addition to Stephen's comments, I think they're sort of important in terms of the rollout from here onwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much for that, Richard. No other members? Dawn, do you want to come in and summarise before we've got recommendations?
Just really, really rich conversation and great responses to the feedback. And I'm just interested in the next steps, because Richard, you've set out really helpfully, that engagement through the various groups that exist. There's been this, the need for engagement with communities and through communities in terms of the development of the action plan. I'm just interested, Stephen, in terms of the timescale now, because, we want to keep the momentum going in terms of this work, because it's such a strong piece of work. We want to keep that momentum going. When might we see the action plan come forward, and can we, reflect on Jeff's point about a small number of strategic actions that will have maximum impact? And that principle needs to kind of drive the thinking around the action plan. We're not looking for action plans that capture everything. It's where the added value is, and where as strategic partners we can really put our emphasis on to make a difference. So just encourage the senior leadership team to have that in mind in bringing forward the action plan. and just to ask when we will see that come forward, and the performance framework. Thank you.
Yeah, I see Richard's nodding, but I'll turn to Stephen for timelines.
Thanks, Chair. Yep, the action plan will be, the final action plan will be presented to the 1st of December board meeting. Yeah. And yes, we'd hopefully to get a draft of the performance framework at the very least to that same meeting.
Joe, did you want to come in?
Just a pragmatic point. I wonder if it would be useful to have a community planning information booklet that sits alongside community planning, which talks about definitions, what's a locality hub, and who sits on what group, so that you don't have to attach it to every set of papers, but it's there for people to refer to, so that it's easier for everybody to be able to understand how they influence and who they contact, because it's hard to connect all that. You've got all the groups, but people don't understand who the groups are. So that idea of both the definitions, but also membership of the group, Stephen. Sorry, more work.
No, Stephen and Nick and I can go away and have a look at that within our sort of planning processes, if that's okay. Good. No other members, so moving to the recommendations, we've been asked to consider and approve the final draft Lloyd document as discussed at paras 3.1 to 3.4, and as attached in Appendix 1, highlight any final suggested changes or amendments. We've had a really good discussion around this and lots of good conversations and questions come out of it, so I think we're fairly happy to consider and approve that. Consider and agree the locality plan focus, approach and use of localised data profiles as detailed at paras 3.5 to 3.7. Note the position and interest in developing a collaborative approach to anchor organisations as outlined at 3.8 to 3.10. Note the position with the LOIP action plan as detailed at paras 3.11 to 3.14, and consider the feedback from the workshop sessions as detailed in Appendix 2. Consider the proposed approach to developing a supporting performance framework as detailed at paras 3.15 and 3.16. And note that an equalities impact assessment has been undertaken on the final draft LOIP document as detailed at para 3.17. And thank you for all your hard work on this, Stephen, and the teams behind it. It's been a massive amount of work, so much appreciated. So we'll get our 10,000 Voices consultation team in. We've got Kelly and Laura and Keegan waiting outside. Batteries run out on my laptop, so that's just compounding today's technical issues. It was full when I came in, so maybe need to look at my laptop that drains in an hour. Sorry? So you'll just give us a minute to get these folk into the room and hopefully connected to the system without too many glitches. She says, touching wood. Okay, so moving on to item 4, the 10,000 Voices consultation and discussion. Very pleased to have Kelly Ross, Laura Kilty and Keegan O'Neill. Met Keegan and Kelly yesterday for a similar presentation, which was brilliant, and they're here to present their findings from the 10,000 Voices consultation, and then we'll obviously open it up for discussion afterwards, if that's okay. So over to you.
So just a quick bit of introduction, a bit of background to 10,000 Voices. It's a consultation that we've recently carried out in Dumfries and Galloway with young people aged 10 to 25 years old. It's the second version of 10,000 Voices. We initially carried out in 2018 as part of the Scottish Government's Year of Young People. So at the moment it's Dumfries and Galloway's largest collection of young people's voices, and it looks at young people's insights into the communities that they live in and the issues that affect them. The reason for doing this initially was that the Youth Work Service was looking at developing a 5-year operational plan and how we could target our resources towards the needs of young people and the needs of local communities. And over the last 5 years we've run a project called 10,000 Voices in Action, and through that we set up a young people steering group, and with external funding we were able to distribute £180,000 into community projects across Dumfries and Galloway that were tackling or addressing the issues that were identified in the consultation. So we ran the consultation again between September 2022 and February 2023. We just managed to just slightly more than the first consultation, just over 50% of young people living, studying and working in Dumfries and Galloway that were involved in version 2. It was a youth-led consultation. The piece of work was handed over to our modern apprentice team that works in the Youth Work Service, and they were able to, they led in all aspects of that along with young people from different communities in Dumfries and Galloway. So at the moment our service is looking at how we can then use this information to inform our services going ahead, but we are trying to get out to as many different organisations and services in the region, trying to get buy-in for other people to get involved in certain parts of it, because it's quite a wide, it is a wide ranging survey, and not all parts would be relevant to all organisations. So the actual consultation was based on the Scottish Government's Place Standards tool, which is a method of gathering people's views in terms of what they feel about the place they live in. This can be used in a street, it can be used in part of a community, a town, but for the basis of this consultation, we were asking young people to think about the ward that they live in, to then enable us to have ward results across all 12 wards. Young people were asked to answer questions in terms of the physical environment that they live in, so looking at the streets and the buildings and the public spaces, but also the social environment, so things that are around them in terms of support networks and the relationships they have with different people within their lives. They were asked to score each question from 1 till 7, with 1 being a lot of room for improvement and 7 being little room for improvement. Some of the questions were tricky, particularly when we were dealing with kind of primary school age and early secondary school. So for the purpose of this consultation, we delivered it kind of workshop based in all 16 secondary schools and primary schools, where we were able to have conversations with young people, set the scene, let them think a wee bit about the context behind the themes before they made their ratings. So it was over a 6-month period, and we were out in all 16 secondary schools, the colleges, the universities, in youth groups. We had a public-facing survey on Mentimeter so that people could just kind of go on and answer it. And we reached out to local employers as well that employed young people under 25, to encourage them to get their staff involved. So the results or the findings we've got, and we've been out and about over the last few weeks sharing them as much as we can. the results that we're going to present today are a regional average, but in the actual report itself, you can look at ward level results, and it's also broken down into age, gender, and some different kind of protected groups like LGBT, young carers, and that kind of thing. So we're able to kind of filter the results as we need them. We reckon that some of the results are quite surprising, but also some of them are reaffirming to what we already know. But what we've kind of asked is for people to kind of think about it with an open mind, because sometimes what we as professionals might think young people think isn't always what we hear back for them, and also some of the young people's views contradict each other as well, but I think that's just part and parcel of any kind of consultation of this scale. The really important thing is, and that's the message that we keep sharing, is that 10,000 voices doesn't give us the answers to anything. It gives us a starting block for future conversations with young people. So this consultation, it'll never be used in silo. We've got like lots of data in Dumfries and Galloway about different the health and well-being. We've got data on the Youth Matters conference. This would always be used in conjunction with something else, but it will never take away the need to speak to young people in communities. But it gives us like a starting place for that. And the other thing to just bear in mind, it's 5 years ago, so we're showing the results of the 2023 along with a comparison for 2018, but we've lived through a pandemic, a cost of living crisis, and loads of factors that might motivate young people's answers differently. And also that of the young people that completed this survey, only a third of those would have completed it 5 years ago, because they've either aged out or they've aged in. So I'm going to pass over to Keegan, who is going to run through the results of initially the 14 questions that were asked in relation to the place standards tool. We've then asked questions about issues that affect young people and whether or no young people plan to leave the region in the future, but we'll look at the place standards first.
So there was 14 questions asked in the place standards tool. The first couple being based on moving around in public transport. So for each question, young people were given a kind of bit of context, which you can see up on the screen there, before being asked to consider are there enough routes to allow the young people to get to where they want to go, and are they safe to use at any time throughout the year. Also, are they affordable? The first question asked in this category was, can I easily walk and cycle using good quality routes? For the question, the regional average was 5 in 2023 compared with a regional average of 5.25 in 2018. The second question was, does public transport meet my needs? With an average of 4.5 in 2023 compared with the regional average of 4.75 in 2018. The next couple of questions were on traffic parking and public spaces, again with the little blurbs and a little bit of context on the screen there. Young people were also asked to consider, do people take priority over cars and other traffic? Are there safe places to cross the road easily? Are there too many cars in the area? Do buildings and public spaces make being in the community a good experience, and are they safe to use? So the first question asked in this category was, do traffic and parking allow people to move around safely and meet the community needs? For this question, the regional average was 4.25 in 2023, with an average of 4.75 in 2018. The second question, do buildings, streets and public spaces create an attractive place that is easy to get around? With an average of 4.25 in 2023 compared with the average of 4.75 in 2018. The next questions were on natural space, play and recreation, with the context up there. Young people were also asked to consider here, are there a range of opportunities for people to experience and have contact with nature? Does community welcome children and young people playing outdoors? And are the spaces and facilities safe to use for all groups all year round? The first question in this category was, can I regularly experience good quality natural space? For For this question, it was 4.75 in 2023, compared with 5.25 in 2018. The second question in this category, can I access a range of space with opportunities for play and recreation? With the average of 4.25 in 2023, compared with the regional average of 5 in 2018. We're now going to look at the questions related to facilities, amenities, work and local economy. And in two questions, we're again asking this theme, with young people asked to consider, is there a range of facilities and employment opportunities that meet community needs? Are these opportunities accessible for everyone? Are there opportunities locally for people to gain skills for work, including education, training and volunteering? And do facilities and amenities meet my needs? No, sorry, that's the first question. Do facilities and amenities meet my needs? With the average of 4 in 2023, compared with the regional average of 4.25 in 2018. And the second question asked was, is there an active local economy and opportunity to access good quality work? For this question, the regional average was 4 in 2023, compared with the regional average of 4.25 in 2018. Next, we're going to see the question related to housing and community. Only one question was asked under this theme, but before making their rating, young people are asked to consider, do you like the houses in their area? Are they good quality? And is there a range of housing options that allow people to stay in the area as their needs change, for example, grown older or families expanding? The only question asked in this theme was, do the homes in my area support the needs of my community? With an average of 4.5 in 2023, compared with the average of 4.75 in 2018. Next, we're going to see the result to the questions related to identity, belonging and social contact. Two questions are again asked in this category, and young people are asked to consider, do people view the community positively? Do people feel ownership and connection? Are the history, heritage and culture of the community known and celebrated? Where is there for people to meet in the community? Does everyone feel like they belong, regardless of age, gender, and ethnicity? The first question in this category asked was, does this place have a positive identity and do I feel I belong? For this question, the regional average was 4.25 in 2023, with a regional average of 4.75 in 2018. The second question in this category, is there a range of spaces and opportunities to meet people, with the average of 4.25 in 2023, compared with the average of 4.5 in 2018. Next, we're going to see the results related to feeling safe, care and maintenance. Two questions, again, were asked in this category, and young people were asked, is there empty or derelict property, crime and antisocial behaviour in the community? Are facilities such as parks, public spaces or properties well maintained? Are there any specific problems in the area, such as litter and vandalism? The first question asked here was, do I feel safe? With an average of 4.25 in 2023, compared with the regional average of 5.25 in 2018. The second question was, are the buildings and spaces well cared for? For this question, the regional average was 4 in 2023, compared with the regional average 4.75 in 2018. The next questions are a combination of the police standards tool, related to influence and sense of control, as well as questions relevant to the themes of the Scottish Government's Year of Young People. 5 questions were asked in this category. We've only got one of them up there. And people were asked to consider here, are people able to contribute to and influence decisions that are being made that affect them? Do organisations such as local authorities, health services and housing associations actively work with the community to understand their needs? The question asked here was, do I feel able to take part in decisions and help change things for the better? For this question, the regional average was 4 in 2023, the same as the average in 2018.
So we're going to move on to look at the questions asked. We asked young people about issues that affect them or people that they know. And then we also asked the second question about issues that they feel they need more information on. There was a list of 23 predetermined choices for young people to select from, and they were exactly the same as we asked in 2018, with the only difference being we added in environment and climate concern as an additional option this time, because that's become more prevalent over the last 5 years as an issue for young people. So the responses are on the screen in the order of the top 5. regional results, and they don't really vary much from ward to ward. Smoking and vaping across all 12 wards is at the top issue for young people. And mental health, bullying and money features across most wards as well. We should say that out of the 23 questions, there wasn't any of them that wasn't marked or highlighted, so we don't want this to look like the other questions aren't important to young people, because they still are, but for the purpose of this, we just condensed it to the top 5. In terms of the 2018 results, the only difference in the top 5 issues affecting young people is that transport has moved out of the top 5 and money and budgeting has moved in. So the 4 are there: smoking and vaping, diet and body image, mental health and bullying remains the same issues 5 years on. And although we really try when we do pieces of work like this not to make assumptions, we do think, obviously, with the cost of living crisis, that's affecting how young people feel about money. And through some of the conversations we had with young people during this, although the travel routes still aren't right for young people, the free bus pass schemes definitely made a difference to how young people feel about transport. And kind of just the observations and talking to young people, I think that's certainly making a difference in how they're getting to move about. So we have got a wee bit more information on some of the conversation we had with young people, but again, it's what we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks and months is working with the Youth Council to unpack that a bit more, because smoking and vaping can mean, or bullying, it can all mean quite a lot, and we've not actually got that level of data or that level of information, but we're hoping through Youth Council and through some of our youth participation groups that we can get back out there and tease that out a wee bit more to be able to come back with more information. And I know that some of the organisations that we've already been into, like the public health and stuff, are hoping that we can get on board with them, because they're looking at the smoking and vaping and some of these issues at the moment. So we've offered as a youth work service and as people that's got connection with young people to support that going forward for anybody that's looking for specific bits of information out of the consultation. So there's no ranking order for these themes, so every out of the 23, there wasn't any that was left unscored. And some issues are more relevant to small pockets of young people, and low numbers don't equate to the issue not being problematic for some. So Keegan's just going to run through the kind of responses to the top 5 and what we've saw when we've been out there.
So as we said, the first issue identified was smoking and vaping. Smoking and vaping being an issue doesn't necessarily mean that these are the wards with the highest rates of young smokers, as they may have responded to this question based on close family and friend groups. The project team including vaping and the use of e-cigarettes in this consultation. As we know, the popularity of vaping has increased since 2018. Second theme, diet and body image. This is something anecdotally we know is a huge issue amongst young people, especially when it comes to mainstream and social medias. Also with mental health and bullying, it can all be linked in with social media. So mental health, these include panic attacks, anxiety, self-harm and suicide. There has been a number of pieces of national and global research carried out that explores the correlation between young people's mental health and mental ill health and poor self-esteem, and the detrimental impact social media can have on young people's well-being. When discussing the top 3 issues, as I say, bullying, mental health and diet and body image, it is linked in with social media. Next, bullying. This option was inclusive to all types of bullying, including verbal, physical and online. Bullying was placed 4th equal alongside money and budgeting and the cost of living when looking at the regional results. As we said, transport moved down from the last consultation and was replaced with money, budgeting and cost of living. For many of the wards, there was not a clear link between the issues they experience and the issues they want to know more about. However, there was an unexpected similarity between a few of the ward areas and what was highlighted in their top fives. The combined regional top 5 issues that young people feel they need more support on, and you can see it up there, they're the same, just in a different order. Whilst it might be tempting to default and use the regional top 5s when talking about young people in Dumfries and Galloway, we hope you can see that they don't necessarily reflect the wider lived experiences of young people, and that's why we want to reinforce the message that 10,000 Voices is just a starting point for conversations with young people, and when we're taking any future work forward, we hope that this can be important in that.
And this was the final and kind of maybe the most contentious question in the survey, and that was in relation to whether young people intend to stay in Dumfries and Galloway in the future. So this was the regional results. 55% of young people across the region said they intended to move away in the future for travel, study and work. Of the 55% that said that they intended to move away, 25% said that they would return to the region in the future. 50% still remained a bit undecided. If this data is then broken down into the responses by age category, the highest age category is 13 to 17-year-olds who said they were going to move away, and that was 60% of those aged 13 to 17 said that they were planning to leave the region in the future. I think it is positive that out of them, some of them are planning on coming back, and I think the focus for us going forward is that we want to make the region a place where they can come back, that the economy's right, there's places to settle, and they want to come back here with their degrees or with their experience and bring that back to the region. We have been kind of posing challenge questions when we've been going out doing this survey and asking folk to think, like, have you ever moved away for the region yourself, to study? Did you come back? Did you think this had a positive or negative impact on how that's helped you to grow and develop? And what made you decide to come back if you've been away and moved back? So although I think it's a regional, it's a national and an international crisis point when young people decide they want to leave their area, I think there is some work to be done there and looking at what can we do to make them stay, what can we do to make them want to come back, and how can we attract other young people to come to Dumfries and Galloway for the same experiences that our young people move to the city for. So it's again, we've not got the answers to this, but I think it's a brilliant point of starting conversations with young people and to get that information. So I'm going to skip by the challenge questions at the end there, because that brings us to the end of the data. The full report is available on our website. If anybody wants to have a look at like specific areas or groups. And I think just to finish, to say that 10,000 Voices, there's no one organisation or service in the region that would use this whole report for planning services, but there'd be bits that are more relevant to some than others. And it is just a starting block for further conversations for young folk. So that's the presentation, and we're happy to take any questions.
Many thanks, Laura and Keegan. Brilliant presentation and a really interesting set of findings as well, which I'm sure everybody around the table here is keen to get into that even deeper and see how that can help us shape our services and policies going forward for young people as well. But I'll open to members. Nick.
Thank you very much. There's no doubt, I don't think, that the 10,000 Voices exercise is probably one of the most powerful pieces of work that takes place in Dumfries and Galloway, and it's something that we need to make sure we can hear loudly when we're planning services. Obviously, there are people of all age who live in Dumfries and Galloway, but it's you that are going to inherit this place, and so we need to make sure that it's a fit and proper place for you to be living in. And we ought to be listening very strongly to the voices you raise about concerns in the area and the things that need to be done to improve it. One of the challenges I think we do need to respond to is that one about demographic loss and people moving out of the area. And it seems to me that the three reasons for moving are things we should be thinking about very carefully. So, for example, if we were to try to ensure that people in the local area got access to good employment locally, but that employment didn't fix them to living in the area for 52 weeks of the year, but had perhaps flexible opportunities of employment, they encourage people to also take travelling opportunities whilst being employed. Is that something we should do? Because employment in the past has been very structured and not very flexible. And it sounds to me like over the last decade or more, people have become more influenced by the desire to travel, be flexible in their appointments, not necessarily be full-time, etc., etc. And I think we need to listen to that challenge and think about whether we can change our employment models to adapt more closely to the needs of younger people so that we can keep people living here rather than feeling they have to go away, because there's no reason why people can't travel whilst they're employed and be living in Dumfries and Galloway. So I think there's things like that I think we need to be thinking about and being creative about in the way we deal with things. And those sorts of opportunities give people money, give people opportunity to extend themselves. Younger people then can do other things on top of just thinking about moving away. So I think some really interesting things for us to say, to respond to in that challenge about people moving away. And all our organisations, if we don't retain you as a vital resource, we're not going to be able to survive, because we need you to be our future workforce and to thrive in this economy by being part of our employment workforce. So I definitely think we need to respond to that in a very creative way.
Thanks, Nick. Are you quite happy with those points?
Yep, and I think that's been the theme of the conversations over the last few months, that young people should have choice about, they shouldn't feel pressured to have to leave the region for study or work. And the choice to travel is brilliant, and but what is it that's here as well? So yes, it's a huge discussion I think we need to have going forward, but I totally agree.
Thanks, Laura. I've got Linda and then Katie online.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Keegan, Laura and Kelly, for that fantastic presentation. And to build a bit on what's just been said in terms of information about young people leaving and then coming back is really positive. But I think you made a really good point, both Laura and Keegan, in terms of it's normal for people to leave where they come from and go somewhere else to have a different experience. That's quite normal. Something that I'd never thought of, and a really good point, was how do we attract people to come down here for that same experience? Because what we've been focusing on in D&G for a long time is the fact that young people leave. But what we haven't perhaps been focusing on as much, and we could maybe do a bit more work on, is how do we attract young people down for the D&G experience, whatever that is. I think we need to quantify that. But we are a rural area, so there's maybe more we can do from that perspective, and there may be more opportunity going forward to work with DGC, Dumfries and Galloway College, in terms of higher education, further education opportunities, and opportunities available from University of Glasgow as well, in terms of, it's something to look at and something to build on. So I think that's a really good point. So thank you so much for making it, because it's something that I'd never thought about before, and I'll let other folk ask some more questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Linda. Katie?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think obviously with sitting within Dumfries and Galloway Council, we've seen the full report of this, and it's tough 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 this. Because the stats are really interesting. The fact that the stats are getting worse, they're not getting better, and I don't know if that has really been captured fully in the presentation, which is great to get that snapshot. But also my question is, and it's one that I refer to often, is about that ladder of youth participation. And where is that youth participation in the community planning partnership? Because our young people are as equally as important in all our planning. So it goes from 1 to 8, from manipulation and tokenism right up to youth initiated leadership. So getting this on the agenda today is really important to help inform discussions, but where do young people sit within the wider community planning partnership? Again, that's maybe just a question for me as a new sub to the meeting today, but I think it's absolutely imperative. We can listen all we like to the responses and take on board and nod form, with all that information, but what is the actual activities that we're doing to ensure young people are not just listened to, but are actually part of the decision making? Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. I'll turn to Stephen first on a couple of those points, and maybe Kelly, if you want to come in as well.
Thanks, Chair. Again, really, really important points, Councillor Hagman. So we've had the Youth Council a number of times to the board itself, and that's an annual commitment. And at our last session, we had obviously we considered the Youth Matters conference report, which was really useful. So we're trying to now better integrate that and keep it live rather than just an annual discussion. We did speak at our last meeting as well about potentially setting up, a young people's focus group that links directly into the board and the new LOIP, almost as a kind of lived experience type approach. So that's something that is in the pipeline, hopefully, and I can work that through with youth work colleagues. Thank you.
Kelly?
So I'll just pick up on the point that Linda came in on as well around the migration. There was a really positive experience yesterday, actually, when there was a minister visit to Dumfries, and the young folk were able to share this presentation yesterday, but able to have a bit of a discussion around the same points that have kind of been raised today around actually it is okay for young folk to leave the region, but how do we attract some young folk to come back, but also new young folk to come back in and help replenish that as well. So I know that there's a lot of great work happening, and there's a lot of work in particular with the universities and the colleges around that pathway and how that's promoted, and also how that then filters to local young folk, but how that's being promoted nationally to other young folk to attract them to come to the area, because there's lots of positives about living and working and learning in Dumfries and Galloway. It's just about, I think, how we think about that moving forward in terms of how we market that at young people. And there was certainly a big conversation around also how we do that and making sure that it's on platforms like TikTok to make sure that that information is getting direct to where young folk are at. So hopefully that helps to just answer that.
Thanks, Kelly. John?
Yeah, thank you very much. Kelly, Laura and Keegan, thanks very much for bringing this report for our attention today, and obviously your colleagues that's been involved in the background doing the work across Dumfries and Galloway. I was really interested in looking at the points near to the end of your report, looking at the key issues, and one for me was the smoking and vaping, and that's a really, I was going to say hot topic. It's a big topic, not just for youth, but for adults as we sort of work through what that all means for our communities. And I was interested to see that 36.5% brought it up to as an issue. And I just wonder how we as partners in the Community Planning Partnership Board take that forward, because it is an issue. And we've just recently looked at our LOIP, we've just agreed it, and under theme 1, health and well-being, we want to improve the health and well-being of our citizens through targeted approaches. But actually, I think it's bigger than community planning. I think it's a political one too. And how do we, as a Community Planning Partnership Board, make sure that our elected representatives at the moment in Scotland are aware that this has been an issue that's been raised by 36.5% of our over 10,848 individual voices, but collectively saying that this is an issue.
Thanks very much for that, John. Jeff, do you want to come in?
And I'm sort of thinking aloud here, Chair, but it seems there's so much data in this, and it's incredibly rich. But it would feel almost more useful if we had a what would we want it to say analysis. So what would we think if we got one of these back and we thought that was absolutely perfect for the region? What would it look like? Because it wouldn't be Thames for everything, would it, realistically? But it would be, what's our realistic best aspiration for the next time we do this? And then to look at those areas where we think we're furthest away from that realistic best aspiration. And are there relatively simple things we can do to try and nudge that up. And I think it picks up Linda's point about the young people moving away, because you wouldn't want 100% of people to stay. You know, you want that people getting new experiences, bringing them back, etc. So it's just, I'd quite like to try and work to ask the young people to think, what would the best realistic set of scores look like, and then work out where those biggest gaps are and what we could help try and fix on there.
Yeah, it's a really good observation. It's almost as if we need sort of performance reporting and targets and then measure them against that. Not that we want it just to become Excel spreadsheets, which it often does. But yeah, Laura, did you want to come back on a couple of those points?
It was just on the point about the smoking and vaping as well, and this is one of the kind of assumptions that we've made that's not been reported, because we do know that that is a serious issue across all wards. And while it was the top issue at 35% or thereabouts, I reckon if we asked young people, like there'll be young people that don't identify that being an issue that affects them. So I reckon if we asked young people if they were vaping, smoking, or it was affecting them, the percentage would have been much higher. Because I think we can safely say with the young people that we work with, it's no 1 in 3 that are vaping. The statistics are much higher. So that although it features as the top issue across all wards and regionally, I think it's the score's not reflective of how much of an issue it actually is. It's just the young people that identify it as an issue. And in terms of the point there about needing to kind of hit aspirational, like an action plan going forward to how we plan, we're looking at developing our own youth work service plan for parts of it, but we're hoping that like other folk will get on board, that we can maybe pull together the different people that are working towards addressing some of these issues to get to that point.
Thanks for that, Laura. Before I bring Joe in, Nick's popped in the chat that he says that assess much of our actions against the key priorities of 10,000 Voices, and NHS has specifically sought a young person as a non-exec board member and successfully employed a 26-year-old, and a model that they intend to build upon. So that's really positive as well. Good. Joe?
I guess it's building up a bit on what Jeff has said. So this hasn't been a blank canvas in the last 5 years. So it would be interesting to ask, for example, mental health services, are you disappointed that this remains a high issue for young people? Is this a disappointing picture? What have we done in the last 5 years around these areas? Would we expect public transport to have dropped out because, so we can make a bit of a correlation, although we can't obviously make a complete correlation between the fact that free bus travel and transport has dropped a bit. What other things have we done? And I guess challenge ourselves to say, are we disappointed with the results? So not about what would we expect, but also if we've worked really hard on keeping young people safe and yet that has dropped in terms of how they feel safe, taking other X factors, what could we be doing differently? And I guess for the plans that we have in 5 years' time, what would we want? What is our aspiration for where we're going in terms of people? So I think we need to use it more imaginatively in terms of connecting to our planning and the actions we've done, because we're not asking against a blank canvas. Things have been done in certain areas, and if everything has gone down, that might be the pandemic, that might be global pictures, that might be Liz Truss's lunacy, but what other factors have we taken into account, and are we disappointed that we've worked really hard in one area and that hasn't in any way impacted on young people's views?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. We discussed this yesterday actually around everything going down. Is that an indicator of young people's mood? You know, just their general mood, you know, having come out of a pandemic and the mental health issues and cost of living that we know they've been heavily impacted on, breaks in education, very unsettling time for young people. But I think the conversations that the Youth Council are going to have and your participation groups to unpick some of that will also be incredibly helpful to us. And the fact that you have the data at ward level is of particular interest to members, because they like to know what's going on in their own personal local area and what the youth workers in those areas can do as well. But Kelly, back to you.
Just wanted to come in on Joe's point there, because I think one of the themes that I've got a particular interest in is young people's mental health, and sit within the strategic group for young people's mental health that feeds into the Children's Services Plan. And that's certainly something that we've been looking at as the results of this, and trying to place that where because I know that between ourselves and NHS colleagues, there's been massive improvement in terms of how we're collaboratively working together, the services that we're offering to young people, a very clear children and young people's mental health pathway now. But I think it's very difficult because of the pandemic, and certainly in terms of the funding from the Scottish Government for the counselling in schools. I know that that was one of the things that they would have liked at the beginning to have been able to measure. Within the 3 years, has there been a reduction in referrals to CAMS? Has this intervention worked? And I think it's very difficult to measure that because of the pandemic, because of the significant impact that we've seen on young people's mental health. So I actually think probably we get in terms of young people's mental health, provided there's not another pandemic, hopefully by the time we do the next 10,000 voices, we should be starting to come out of that and starting to see a clearer picture in terms of, are we seeing a reduction? Is this starting to work? But that certainly has been monitored. Like Laura said, it shouldn't be used in isolation. I know that there's other ways that the services are being evaluated externally. So like the Children's Commissioner ran one in particular on all 32 local authorities around the counselling in schools. Scottish Youth Parliament have just done one on the Community Mental Health Fund that came to each local authority as well. So we're getting them other reports, but we need to look at them all together to get a better picture. So I hope that's helpful. Sorry, Joe.
Always very helpful, Kelly. Did you want to come in, Nick?
If you don't mind, yeah, it's just, I think we've got to be a bit like what Jeff said. I think we've got to be careful about what we're looking for here. I suspect even if the mental health services in the patch were 100% diamond, you would still have mental health in the population because that's the way mental health is. So I'm not so sure we're potentially looking for a reduction in mental health or mental health usage. I guess I'd be more interested to be assessing whether the voices of children and young people say that the services they're receiving are meeting the needs that they have at the time, rather than there being a gap in the services or a gap in access, or that the services they receive end up not being helpful to them. So I think mental health is always going to be a significant factor in a population. But can we have conversations with the younger people about whether the services that they are receiving are getting better in terms of meeting their need? And I think that was the challenge you originally said to us before about this is the start of a conversation. I'd be interested to know how we take conversations into the partnership and into things like our public health groups and etc. to try and identify what we do about the challenges you're placed with us. Because going back to that thing about vaping, for example, it's an issue for young people. I'm assuming it's not an issue because you want more access to it. I'm assuming it's an issue because you are concerned about the effect it might have on people as they get older and it potentially affects their health conditions. In which case we ought to be thinking about, does that mean we need to do something in terms of a legislative framework, for example, across Scotland, which is potentially where I think we are needing to go. But if we can add your voice to the voices of younger people across the other parts of Scotland to make that challenge up to the authorities, then I think we ought to be doing that. But we need to capture that and understand it properly, I think.
Jeff, we want to come in on that point.
Yes, just, and again, I've not really thought this through, but you almost want a completely left field different perspective on this, and there's no local authority in Scotland that collects data like this, and I think that's fine because we're swamped with the Scottish data anyway. But if we were to ask and support our young people to link with a rural area in Wales or in New Zealand or somewhere else, you would get a completely different perspective on what, for example, the mental health of their population was. And then you'd get real radical learning about, well, what's different here, legislatively and environmentally and service-wise. And that, I think, could be both fun for the individuals that are involved in this project and give us something that's just quite unique to say, well, actually, it looks as though we do need legislation to fix this because the laws in New Zealand are X, Y, Z different. Or actually, the laws don't seem to make any difference because we're getting similar scores in a different environment. That, to me, would seem really, really interesting piece of work to do. And again, would be fun for those collating this and putting all the effort that they do to get this data out to actually link with young people somewhere else that's experiencing broadly similar rurality issues, but in a completely different context.
I think you got the job. No, really, really interesting observations that, yeah, you'll take that away and we'll help you with it if required. Richard, I'm mindful of time, so we'll maybe give you the final word at this stage.
No, that's helpful. Thanks, Chair. And it was really an attempt to sort of move us forward, listening to the really rich debate, which I think has been great, and putting my youth work hat on in terms of my day responsibilities, if you like. Fantastic, the level of buy-in and support from community planning partners into this whole agenda. So I think there are a couple of actions for us off the back of this, particularly aligned with remembering the role of the community planning partnership leadership team, which is to be the engine room. So to listen to the discussions that have happened in the room today, and to really then drill down in terms of what we need to do as a collaborative to get to the point where we can capture some of the challenges that the board members have made today, not only within that context, but again working with those thematic themes and the locality hubs around making sure we break down barriers and the young people and the information that we gather through this excellent exercise is used to influence and shape the multi-agency services we provide through those mechanisms. So I think, if it's okay with the board and with your support, we'll try and capture some of these key and real challenging statements that the board have made today, and we'll feed those into the leadership team and see how we can continue to have this discussion and try and drill down a bit and take it forward into some tangible outcomes. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much for that, Richard. Very helpful, and I see Stephen's frantically jotting things down. So if the board's happy with that. John, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. I would welcome that. And I think, would that be able to come back to the December meeting? Because I think we've heard from colleagues within the report and around the table that there are some significant issues, and certainly the one that has been mentioned that I brought up too. Thank you.
Richard's nodding his head and Stephen's nodding his head. So, yeah, good. Thank you so much again, Laura, Keaton, Kelly. Always a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Okay, for members' benefit, we've postponed deferred the Workforce Summit presentation. We'll bring that to the December board, presumably. Yeah. So we will move on to item 6, which is the Dumfries and Galloway Compact Partnership. Over to you, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a short report and really building on the refreshed arrangements for community planning and recent discussions. It's been felt that partnership arrangements and understanding could be even further strengthened by developing a compact agreement with the third sector, and that's a model that is used in other local authority areas, and as partners we're keen that it's best practice, and really would like to work towards getting that work completed. Norma and the third sector colleagues have fed into the report, and it's really just to agree the concept and the scope so we can take the work forward at pace. Thank you.
That's great, Stephen. Members, Norma, do you want to?
Very briefly, Gail. Yes, we do welcome this step forward. I think it could be a significant shift in the relationship between the third sector and its role in community planning. You'll not be surprised to know I'm slightly worried about the resource implications and the capacity within my own team to develop this work. So maybe offline and through the senior leadership team we can talk about how it might be resourced. I don't underestimate how much work could be involved in developing something like this. So we need to agree the scope, scale of it, and also how it will be resourced.
Thanks for that, Norma. Dawn, do you want to pick up on that point and your own observations?
I really welcome this, Chair, and it's something that I've been keen to see how we could develop within Dumfries and Galloway, because it provides a potential framework and a platform for really strong, positive, constructive working relationships. And so I really welcome this coming forward. I think the issue of capacity, absolutely understand, and I think if we can ask the leadership team to give that consideration in terms of how this is progressed. This needs to be developed with the full engagement, involvement of the third sector, but ideally as well, this is something for the public sector as a whole. And, it's something that, from a local authority perspective, I think would be really positive, and you know, other public sector organisations may think similarly. So I think it would be really powerful for Dumfries and Galloway to have something that is agreed, owned, you know, across the Community Planning Partnership Board, and not something that reflects a set of relationships between the third sector and one individual organisation, because this will, you know, potentially enable very different ways of working and relationships moving forward to deliver on our shared outcomes. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Dawn. So I don't see any other members indicating at this stage. So we've been asked to agree to the development of the compact partnership and consider the scope of works and associated timeline as detailed in the appendix. All happy to do so? Good. Okay, moving on to item 7. I think Valerie's online. There she is. Welcome, Valerie. Over to you on a public
good morning.
health annual report.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's great. Thanks very much. Really delighted to have the opportunity to speak to Community Planning Board and present the first Director of Public Health report that I have been involved in authoring. I'm just going to give a very high level of some of the key messages of the report, and as the sort of cover paper has outlined, it's usual practice for a Director of Public Health and a territorial board to write an annual report on matters that they feel are pertinent to the health of the local population. We have not had a Director of Public Health report in Dumfries and Galloway for very, very many years, and I'm afraid to say that the first report that I've put out, which is really a bit of a stock take in terms of where we are post the pandemic, really actually does make for some quite difficult reading. And just as I say, those key messages are the improvements that we have seen for very many years in the number of years that we can expect to live have now started to decrease. We had seen improvements in life expectancy stalling before the pandemic, and that trend has continued into a decrease, and that is being seen nationally. The number of years that we can expect on average to live in good health has also been getting worse, with the latest data showing that on average men can expect to live 15 years in ill health and women 20. The inequalities that we see at national level in relation to life expectancy and disease patterns by Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation are replicated at lower level, and we do see social patterning of these measures in our most deprived areas. Now, that's not to say that we don't have hidden areas of inequality in our rural areas. We certainly do, but there is definite social patterning that we can see in our more deprived areas. The burden of disease that we have is also projected in Scotland to increase by at least 21% by 2043. And because the bulk of that increase is in the 65 to 85-year-old age group, because of the makeup of our population, the impacts for our region are likely to be much higher. We also very sadly have a fifth of our children living in poverty in the region, and that does have significant impacts for their future health and well-being. On a sort of more population makeup stage, and I know that colleagues around this table are very, very cited on this, we have a predicted decrease of 13% in the working age population and a 58% increase in our over 75 population coming down the line as well. And all of this together means that the implications for health and social care provision are very significant, but also for our wider functioning of our society. We do need to have a healthy population to be able to work, to contribute to society, so it does paint a pretty grim picture. The diagram on diagram 7 on page 12 outlines those factors for health and well-being, and I think it's really important to highlight that 80% of that is actually about the world around us, the environment that we actually live in, with 20% being attributed to healthcare provision. So it makes it really important that we do actually focus on those wider determinants of health to keep individuals healthy. But I think probably it's worth highlighting that from a health and social care perspective, the impacts of the pandemic and the waiting list that we do have now is difficult for our population, with people waiting for care. So that is something that we do need to address and are working really hard in order to do that. So it's quite easy to get disheartened by these figures, but I do actually firmly believe that in Dumfries and Galloway we are in a good place. Some of the key messages in terms of how we can address this I've outlined at the report, and many of them are incorporated into the new LOIP, which I know you've been discussing earlier on today. And those important sort of areas of focus are putting health at the heart of what we do and as a common goal across our sectors and across society. Now, that does sometimes mean difficult trade-offs, particularly in relation to the economy. A term wellbeing economy is one that is gaining sort of increasing traction, and that's looking to increase economic development in a sustainable way for both people and the environment, rather than just continued economic growth for the sake of that. In the LOIP, there's a lot of talk about developing the concept of anchor organisations, and everybody sitting around the table works within an anchor organisation and has that opportunity to contribute to the local community through actions as employers, how they procure goods, how we manage our assets, and how we look after our environment, and also how we design and deliver services. But also, really importantly, we collaborate together and learn from each other on anchor journeys. And of course, you're never going to get a director of public health who's not going to say we need to focus on prevention, and that is really critical, because if we just focus on treating disease, we're never going to get out of this cycle that we have of treatment, and the pressures will just continue, and as I've said, will just get worse. And we cannot do any of this alone. We have to be working right across our sectors. We have to be collaborating with our communities. Our communities really are key partners in this. And again, with the forthcoming locality plans and that opportunity to look at how we work together is going to be so vital with our communities. So, as I say, I do honestly believe we've got a really good track record of partnership working. We've got a good track record of focusing on some really key actions. We did that during the pandemic, and I think the new LOIP and having some key areas of focus will stand us in good stead. I'm really, really happy to take any questions that anybody may have, and that's me. Thank you very much, Chair.
Many thanks, Valerie, and thank you for the very comprehensive report within the pack as well, and for coming along today. I'll pass it over to members. Oh, you might be getting off lightly here. Oh no, Katie?
Thank you, Gail. Yeah, no, thank you, Valerie, for the report. I think it's really useful to get that sort of snapshot annual report. I've actually been asked by Stephen, who I'm subbing for, just to ask if it's appropriate at this point about dentistry services in D&G. They're not named at all within the annual report, but I've been highlighted in terms of NHS Scotland's delivery plan guidance. There's reference about increasing capacity for in-house and routine and urgent dental care, and obviously with announcements yesterday in the west of the region, that's really pertinent. So the question really in regards to that aspect is, what's being done locally in order to meet those challenges. The report makes reference to the heart disease etc. And child poverty, and I'm aware of linkages between dental inputs and actually long-term heart disease. Obviously, child poverty is a huge issue, and during the pandemic, there was just a lack of services, and I'm also aware that certainly from child protection, often it's dentistry services that are maybe identifying where there are vulnerable children that intervention is required with. And certainly in terms of funding, I know funding is an issue for all sorts of reasons in all organisations, but evidence submitted last year to Parliament in pre-budget scrutiny made clear that the NHS was never designed to work alone, and we need the full partnership. So I'm really pleased to see mention of the collaborative approach, but it's just how do we strengthen that? And obviously having the report here within this forum is all steps forward, so I really welcome that. And it's great that we do have that annual report. So there's a few questions there, but primarily the issue of dentistry being an urgent one as a potential for actually combating some of these issues as well. Thanks.
Many thanks, Katie. Valerie?
Yeah, so Councillor Hagman, obviously this is a broad spectrum report on high level population indicators. It is not a report delving into delivery of each individual service across NHS, Dumfries and Galloway, across health and social care. The issue in relation to dentistry is a significant one. It is one that the NHS board is taking very seriously and is indeed on the corporate risk register, with a number of actions being taken in relation to that, and reporting goes through the board's healthcare governance committee and up to the NHS board. I have to be very honest in that there is no magic bullet to solution in terms of the challenges we have in relation to NHS dentistry. There is a significant workforce shortage that is not just in Dumfries and Galloway, it is now being felt right across Scotland, significantly so in England. And we have, as we've reported in various forums and in briefings to elected members, have had a significant number of deregistrations, and the focus has been on looking at how we can increase access to emergency care provision and urgent care provision for those who are not registered. We have been working with colleagues in the Scottish Government as well, and are starting to look at, well, what actually does a sustainable model of NHS dentistry look like in rural areas when we actually have a really significant challenge in that there is not the workforce there and able to do this. So actually those aspects where we need to focus on prevention and early intervention is key, and I'm delighted to say that the toothbrushing school nursery toothbrushing programme has been very successfully remobilised with really quite high uptake at the end of last year within our nurseries and primary schools throughout Dumfries and Galloway. We've also are remobilising the fluoride varnish programme, which is in some targeted schools across the region. But I think, there is no magic bullet to this, and what we are really focused on is making sure that people can access emergency and urgent care when they need it, and there is a dental helpline where people can contact if they need that individual care. So that's that one. But Kate, happy to pick up if there's if there's more detail that you need in relation to that.
Thanks, Chair. I think the question, as I say, from Stephen was primarily also about the contracts and how can we work with private dentistry to ensure, and maybe that's a work nationally that needs to be done in terms of contracts, but we can follow up out with the meeting. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Valerie.
Thanks, Katie. I've got Linda and then John in the room.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Valerie. Twice in 1 week. Thanks for the report. Absolutely fantastic and long overdue. And it does provide, as well as a snapshot, I think it provides an overview of some of the previous years. And the introduction, a positive introduction, you used the word grim, but the introduction talks about D&G is a great place to live, work and play, and visit. So it is, I think we need to push that as well. So it's not all bad, but it's not great reading in terms of that. I think a lot of it's perhaps due to COVID, or part of it's due to COVID. It's probably exacerbated things. I'll leave that as a question. But what again concerns me, and something we touched on yesterday and I've touched on already, is the health inequalities gap. Maybe the region that mirrors Scotland. There is a deprivation, and what poverty does to people. And you mentioned a very significant statistic of 20% of our children living in poverty. That hasn't shifted for a number of years, which is, it's not a healthcare issue, it's everybody's issue. So one of the things that I think is important that as a community planning partnership we need to focus on, as well as being totally aware of these statistics, which are not great, is the priority that I think you mentioned, that prevention. And we've spoken about this for years and years in various different forums that I've worked in, including the NHS and the prison service. Prevention. We haven't got a handle on it, I don't think, yet. A good enough handle on it, and I think that's, from my perspective, where we need to look at most of all, perhaps, in addressing health inequalities and poverty in this region. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Valerie, do you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose we've got an opportunity with the locality plans that are going to be looked at, and actually maybe a different way when we develop those under the LOIP as to how we actually work together in different ways and with our communities to actually tackle some of these issues. I don't actually know that there is a magic bullet to any of these. These are really complex issues that we face, but actually by working together in different ways, by maybe trying to pull together, we've got so many different plans, don't we, that we try and take forward, by trying to maybe streamline things all a bit more. We've got an opportunity to go like, well, let's try working differently together. So I think that's maybe an opportunity that we should try and grasp and see, well, does that actually make a difference? Because there's some really complex things that we need to work through here. So I do think there is an opportunity here in terms of, I think we were seeing these trends before the pandemic. We certainly saw inequalities before the pandemic. They've undoubtedly exacerbated them, but there is still that underlying issue that we need to really work differently to try and address. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie. John?
Thanks very much, Chair. Valerie, thanks very much for the report. It does make grim reading, but I think, as you've said, that there is opportunities for us to look at it and work potentially differently. And I suppose one of the questions that I have is that I know within third sector, but I wonder also within health and social care, has consideration been given about our current visitors who are living in the region from Ukraine and other settlements? Are there opportunities or discussions happening to see whether we could have people with the relevant skills to help within health and social care, or to help with issues that obviously we know that are ongoing? And I also just want to go back to the report that we've just had previously from 10,000 Voices, and looking at your report in figure 5 and the leading causes of early death. And for me, it's very striking seeing that lung disease, lung cancer, is really high up there. And I know that we've agreed that we're going to come back with a paper in December looking at the way forward on the 10,000 Voices. I just wonder, in light of this report and what we've agreed in the LOIP about health and well-being as one of our key priorities, is there anything around the table as partners we can do to tighten up on the issue that the youth are telling us about vaping? Is there tighter licensing laws that can be done? What can the local authority do? What can health, what can we in the third sector do to make sure that we want to make sure that we're looking after, we're hearing what youth are telling us, what we're going to do about it, and how can we help them? So preventative, thank you.
Because there's clearly a correlation between what our young people are saying and what is within this report. Absolutely, yeah. Valerie, last word on this, and then I'll move to the recommendations.
Yeah, no, I think vaping really is an area of serious concern. The Public Health Committee is actually having a briefing on vaping on Monday. I'm going to be discussing some of that and also a presentation, the 10,000 voices as well. But I do think that that is an area of action that needs partnership action, and one that we could actually put in the LOIP action plan that's being developed to really have some concerted focus on this, because it feels like everything is all tying together in terms of the perspective of young people, the impacts that is being seen in terms of disruption in schools in terms of vaping. So I think that is definitely an area that we could certainly look to include in that and take action on, and also, you know, from community planning, you know, you may also want to escalate issues with the Scottish Government as well, because we know in terms of smoking, in terms of that policy, you need legislative action as well to actually really tackle it. So there could be an escalation route where we can all pull together in relation to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie. I think that would be really helpful. And as a council, we've already started that process with engagement with Scottish Government and UK Government, particularly around vaping, advertising of vaping. You know, legislation takes a long time, but we all know that if you walk in any village shop in Dumfries and Galloway, the entire door is covered in very shiny, you know, colourful vape packaging, and it's incredibly enticing to young people. So we're looking at that within the council, but certainly I think a partnership approach might be required to Scottish and UK Government at some point. I know Richard's just put his camera on. Does he want to speak?
It was just to follow up on that very briefly. Thanks, Chair, because again, I'm going back to that, the role of that senior leadership team, and the licensing one's an interesting one because it's something we've talked about in various guises for a long time with Valerie. I've had long, detailed discussions around, you know, mobile food outlets out with schools, etc., and we've never really got to a point where, for various issues, and you mentioned the legislative angle where we've really cracked it. So I think it's a wicked issue, and one that's certainly in terms of the vaping matter is one that's very relevant, and again a good topic for that senior leadership team to get its teeth into and see what we can do to remove some barriers and or work better together to a more positive end.
That's really helpful, Richard. Thanks very much. John, go on.
So I just note that I was just interested if Valerie did have any thoughts on the question regarding our friends and visitors from Ukraine and other countries, whether there's an opportunity to maybe have people from those areas being able to help within health and social care, within third sector, etc., across the partnership.
Valerie?
Yeah, John, I don't have a detailed answer for you in relation to that, but I'm pretty certain that council colleagues do work really closely with our Ukrainian guests and those from other, and do seek to support employability options, and there is good partnership working in relation to health and social care in relation to that. So I do think I have heard of examples where we have actually had people coming into the health and social care sector as visitors, but again I'm not cited on the detail of it, but I'm pretty sure that does take place, and there's a lot of support given to our guests to be able to contribute to all our sectors. Thanks.
Thanks, Valerie. And Richard's nodding his head as well, so yeah. Okay, to the recommendations, we've been asked to discuss the content of the report, which we've done, and to note the report was presented to the Innovation and Transformation Committee of the IGB on the 10th of August to help inform future strategic commissioning plans and intentions, and discuss any further action the board would like to take in light of this report, and will have encapsulated the legislation and licensing issues around vaping. Yeah, good. Thanks very much, Valerie. I think for the benefit of the folk in the room, we will have a very, very quick 5-minute comfort break because we've been sitting for over 2 hours. So we'll come back at 12:30. Right, moving on to item 8, updates on key plans and strategies. So this is the standing updates on the plans and strategies that contribute to the local outcomes improvement plan, and key points in relation to each plan are highlighted in the overview paper. But as usual, we'll go through each plan in turn, and in order to allow members the opportunity to comment or ask questions. So, Stephen, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. In the last few sessions, we've produced a summary paper, and there's a lot of information in the appendix, and maybe just some key points to pick out. Certainly in terms of the Children's Services Plan, it's great to see that's now available, published, easy read, BSL interpretation, etc. And the joint report for 2020 to 23 is endorsed by the Council and NHS Board and has been sent on. What else? Yep, just in terms of the CLD Partners Plan, just to highlight, we've put some information in there on the evidence report for 21-22. It's slightly behind, we're already starting on the 22-23 report, but there's also a national programme of CLD progress visits, and certainly 2 of our Ayrshire authorities have those upcoming in the next few months, so we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So in terms of the minute, it would probably be helpful just to put a note about the board has considered that and the information. That would be good. In terms of health and social care, winter planning has obviously started, and you will note the development of a targeted operating model, so obviously coming into a critical time. In terms of the local development plan, the timetable for the LDP3 has now been approved, and the interest in place plans is continually growing. It was 22 in the report here, but I think that's now up to 26 or 28, I think, by the last call. Some important updates around the housing strategy, as you will see, in terms of the Affordable Housing Supply Programme and allocation of 61 million, and energy efficient schemes underway as well. In terms of poverty and inequalities, the new chair of the partnership has started this week and is going through a period of induction, and I'm sure Nick will be coming along to these meetings to introduce to colleagues as we go as well. And finally, just in terms of the economic strategy, most members will be aware the UNESCO status has been extended for 10 years for the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire Biosphere. So that's just some highlights from the more detailed information. Thank you.
That's great, Stephen. Thank you very much. So going back to each area in turn, the Children's Services Plan, do members have any comments or queries? Joe?
Oh, thanks. I was surprised to learn this week, and I mean, notwithstanding the compact and the work we've done with the third sector, that the role of the third sector has been downgraded since I worked in the Children's Services Plan. So third sector used to sit in the Children's Services Executive Group, which was the decision-making group for children's services. And actually we now sit on the Children's Services, I can't remember the title, Strategic and Planning Delivery part of the group, which is not the decision-making part of the Children's Services Plan. This is particularly pertinent when we think about the whole family wellbeing funding, of which Dumfries and Galloway got almost £1 million. I'm presuming the decision about that funding was made at the Children's Services Executive Group, which we don't sit on, despite the fact Scottish Government have said in the guidance, when they told us about this funding, that planning and decision making is collaborative, and it is essential to ensure parity across all CSPP partners, including the third sector. So I know that the work in the compact might take a bit of work. I'm wondering whether or not there's a quick win by immediately inviting the third sector back onto the executive group of the Children's Services Planning Partnership. I don't know how we managed to fall off that group. And I would also like to find out what decisions have been made about the £917,000, which is for whole family wellbeing fund to Dumfries and Galloway, which is about transformative change. It's not about services that we're currently delivering. It's about changing children's services. It's about preventative stuff. It's about doing things differently. So I guess for this year, this funding goes right on until 2026, I think. So hopefully we should get that fund every year. But for this year, I'd like to find out what decisions were made about that funding, how the third sector was involved. I'm not sure we were at all. and some sort of commitment for the subsequent years that we will be involved in that decision making. The Scottish Government makes it clear we should be. Yeah, concerns.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Joe. I mean, obviously we'll feed this back to Jim Brown as well, but Stephen, do you want to maybe just comment?
No, thanks, Chair. No, just on that, conveniently, I'm actually meeting Jim Brown later on after this meeting, so I'll make sure all these points are raised with him and you get an answer in quick course, Joe.
I think the Community Planning Partnership Board, though, could say that they would expect the third sector to sit on that group. I think that, I don't know where the decision is made that they fell off the group, because obviously I lost sight of that once I retired, but I think the Community Planning Board could at least say to Jim, we would expect to see the third sector before the compact is agreed, would be sitting on that group, because it is about decision making, and it's clear that we have a role in decision making. Every paper we've had today talks about collaboration and the essential nature of everybody being around the table if we're going to do things differently and more radically.
Yeah, I think we can add that to the minute, and I'll look to Richard for any further comment that wouldn't permit that.
So I think this is coming left field, Stephen and I read it, but so with the board's support, we'll look into this and give a commitment to Joe and indeed the board that we'll look to take these matters forward. Obviously, in terms of the outstanding action, in terms of the Community Planning Partnership Board action log, in terms of that external funding, we don't mention the Family Wellbeing Fund, but we can include it in that update, so the board's got a written update as well, and we'll bring that back as well. But Stephen and I can look into this and update further, Chair.
Thanks, Richard. Dawn, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just to say thank you to Norma did raise this with me recently as a concern. So my understanding was that Jim had provided further feedback. So I'm happy as well to pick up when you speak with Jim later. I'll have the conversation with him to see how we can resolve this as we move forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. Norma?
Thanks, Gail. I think it's really important that the CPPB understands this is not just about the whole family wellbeing fund, though that issue has brought it to a head. What Joe's saying is that third sector, Dumfries and Galloway, as the representative body of the third sector in the region, was on the most senior level of the Children's Services Plan overseeing group and has now been downgraded, it seems, to a lower level where the key decisions in strategic direction are not made on all the Children's Services Plan. The whole Family Wellbeing Fund is just one small part of a much bigger picture.
Thanks for that, Norma. That's noted, and we'll let Dawn, Richard and Stephen get to the bottom of this and report back. Thank you. No other questions on that element? So we'll move on to Dumfries and Galloway Community Justice Outcome Improvement Plan, and obviously all comments will be recorded and fed back to Vicky Binney. Any comments from members? Nope, happy with that plan, good. CLD Partner Strategic Plan. Stephen will take comments on this. Nope, not seeing anybody indicating. Thank you. Employability and Skills Plan. Obviously, we'll get the presentation at the December board as well. Oops, my iPad's now falling over. No comments on that. Health and Social Care Strategic Plan. Nope, good. Local Development Plan 2. Moving on to Local Housing Strategy. And Poverty and Inequality Strategy. And lastly, South of Scotland Regional Economic Strategy. Did you put your hand up there, Norma? Yeah. Or you're on mute.
I was struggling with a button there. Yes, I feel I have to raise the point that's made in the report, which refers to good progress having been made on the delivery plan. And if I could just explain to the board that there are, for those of you who are not familiar with the delivery plan of the Regional Economic Strategy, there are 47 actions in it. Third sector Dumfries and Galloway, the TSI, is identified in 25 of them as a key partner. At the meeting yesterday, a subgroup of the REP that was set up to just review the progress against all these actions, I explained that out of those 25 actions where we identified as a key partner, in 18 of them, we had no involvement at all in the delivery of the actions. At least that's how it looked in the plan. We certainly had not been engaged with by the key partners who arguably are the leads. Now, I don't want to get into a big old finger pointing thing here. What I do want the board to appreciate is that whilst progress has been made, it's almost impossible to say that good progress has been made because the data gathering mechanisms for finding out what all the different partners have been doing are simply not in place. One of the reasons why we were invisible in 18 of the 25 is because no one asked us for the information about what we have been doing. There's about a third of them we have been involved and we have been asked about our involvement. So I would not want the board to be under the impression that this is a complete picture, is my point. Now, I will be raising this through the community representatives on the Regional Economic Partnership. It is already raised with my colleagues in South of Scotland Enterprise, but for completeness and transparency, I think it's important that the board here appreciates this.
Thanks for that, Norma. Stephen's jotted down as well, so we'll reflect on that. I mean, obviously, the Regional Economic Strategy report to us, but that needs to be fed back to them. Yeah. So Stephen will take that forward, Norma. Thank you. With that, board members are... Sorry. Oh, Linda, sorry.
Okay, Chair, it's a late hand. Could I ask a question on the South of Scotland Regional Economic Strategy? It's just a small point. They said there was a... I've lost it again, sorry. Oh, God, this is good. Yeah, a workshop planned for 30th of August. I've got too many papers in front of me, apologies, and a very small desk. Their colleagues from SOSI local authorities, registered social landlords, etc., were coming together. Can we get some feedback on that, please, perhaps the next meeting? It's always useful to find out exactly what's going on, if that's possible. Thank you. Small point, but I think quite important. Cheers.
Thanks, Linda. Stephen and Richard are nodding their heads, so we'll make sure that comes to the next board. Thank you. Okay, so as I say, board members are invited to note the progress being made in relation to key strategies and plans that support the LOIP as detailed in Appendix 1. Sorry? Oh no. And provide any constructive comments, which we've done. Okay, thank you, members. So moving on to item 9, business brief. Over to you again, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. I'm conscious of time, so just a few brief highlights. The first point is post the last board meeting, there was a requirement for a decision to be made in relation to the Refugee Resettlement Board. So there's a paper attached in the appendix. It's just for homologation, and it was delegated to the leadership team in liaison with the co-chairs. Also, it's just for information and interest, just some of the key points that have come out of the national review in relation to community planning and the role of community planning partnerships. So some key points there in terms of the role they could play in emergencies going forward, for example, and clarity around that, noting the streamlining of the complex lines of accountability. It would noted that there's a lack of resource potentially in terms of engagement around that, so that's some of the key points there. Obviously the James Withers review is incredibly important in terms of the work of the partnership, employability skills, and etc. going forward. So again, just on page 111, just bullet pointed some of the key points there for interest as well. And early in the meeting, John mentioned about community transport, and there was a discussion at the August meeting in terms of funding to date and funding that might need to be deferred or delayed until next year. And it's been agreed that, well, I'm going to be working with Norma on a paper to take to the October senior leadership team to try and take this forward, because I know it's it's been an ongoing matter, and the board have committed to trying to make sure there's a sustainable model in place and supporting that. So that's the plan we have going forward. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. And how does the work, before I come to John, on the community transport link into our retendering and review of regional transport?
Well,
just
I probably can't explain the detail, but Douglas Kirkpatrick is involved on both sides, and I know there's been conversations, so he's involved in it. Yeah.
John?
Yeah, just 2 points. One will be on community transport, but the first one was on number 3, the key issues the refugee resettlement point. Can I just make comment that I think there was a very difficult summer where misinformation was out there, and just to commend partners for the clear, concise information about the hotel changeover and individuals being brought into the region under very difficult circumstances. I think partners and their clear, concise message helped to calm that situation, whereas looking on social media, the language was absolutely shocking. So thank you, and that was a really good piece of work. And just mentioning, looking at partners involved, Mool, people will be aware of that. I recently visited and volunteered there, and they're doing amazing work with the refugees across Dumfries and Galloway. Community transport, I've heard, Stephen, significant energy and oxygen has been given to that topic. I hope very soon that we'll be able to see a clear way forward. Community transport is playing a key role in some of our communities across the region. And I know that working with Third Sector, Dumfries and Galloway, and our wraparound service in the health DGR right now, community transport is involved in getting people discharged quickly and timelessly. So key role for that project, and I think we need to bottle it out and get it sorted.
Thanks, John, and thanks for your comments. I totally agree and welcome your comments around the refugees and the communications. I think that they were absolutely essential, and some of the comments on social media were absolutely appalling. And we will continue to ensure that the right communications are out there as partners as well. Do you want to pick up anything on the community transport?
I think progress is in hand. I know it's Councillor Hammond.
Katie?
Thanks, Gail. And you've referenced in your remarks there about the regional transport offering and how that sits within the community transport. I think it's absolutely crucial, and I'm not clear. Again, I'll put my hand up as a newly sub-member on this board, how it all connects together. We've just noted the South of Scotland Regional Economic Strategy, and within that, transport infrastructure is actually marked as one of the key areas over the next 2 years. So how does the work with community transport? And I was at a community council meeting last night getting a talk from St John's Scotland about cancer transport and how vital that is, and they're completely reliant on donations and fundraising. That obviously will form part of community transport options, but how are we looking to try and find a resolution? Again, maybe it's a declaration of interest. I literally could not get up to the Central Belt for 10:30 in public transport on Monday. I had no vehicle. I ended up paying for a £40 taxi for a 12-mile journey to Bar Hill train station. The trains don't link up. The buses don't link up. Community transport is trying to fill in some gaps, but there's some serious concerns, and it's really frustrating as one of the elected members that this is a narrative, it's a conversation that I've experienced for the last 6 years, and I don't see any headway. So I really welcome that the board is doing work about this, but how are we progressing it? How are we getting what good news we're doing across the region out into the public domain so the public know what we're doing and what our aspirations are? Because there seems to be lots of misaligning going on, but it's not through lack of good intentions, it's just it doesn't ever seem to be coming together. So forgive me if this is not the right forum, but at any opportunity I will absolutely bring it up. Thank you.
No, fair comments, Katie, and Stephen's jotted them down. Obviously, we will feed into processes alongside the council. Dawn, I'll turn to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hagman. Obviously, it's a priority within the RES, and that takes a South of Scotland perspective. And, you know, for us, community transport, we're keen to see the progress within Dumfries and Galloway, and where there are opportunities for joint approaches or to learn from borders, obviously that will be part of the overall. But transport goes, you know, the transport challenges we face go far beyond community transport, and that's why the role of the RES and how we, you know, work with Scottish Government, work with Transport Scotland, work with all of the key bodies to really promote the interests of, you know, rural communities and how we can make better those connections. It's a real priority. It's a clear priority for council members as set out in our council plan. And so as it features within all of those key strategic plans, you know, there is a need to progress. But community transport's one important, but not the only aspect of this that we need to see progress on. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Dawn. Okay, with that, we'll move to the recommendations. We've been asked to homologate the decision in relation to the Refugee Resettlement Board. We've to note the findings of the National Community Planning Review as summarised in para 3.5. Note the findings of the independent review of the skills delivery landscape. Note the current position with community transport, and we've noted a number of comments around community transport that will be encapsulated within the minute. And then note the minute from the CPSLT meeting held on the 11th of May 2023. So thank you, members. Moving on to item 10, again over to you, Stephen, on the Community Planning Partnership Improvement Plan.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a follow-up from the previous meeting where I was asked to review and make some amendments. So probably helpful just for clarity. The improvement plan is not to be confused with the LOIP action plan. So there was a slight crossover, so some of those actions in the improvement plan have been taken out and to put in the LOIP action plan, but linked to discussions earlier in the meeting. You know, this is more about, you know, governance, the communication of the LOIP, benchmarking, etc., and some of the, you know, the operational matters behind the scenes to progress the partnership and make sure we've got a solid board and back of house governance arrangements in place, really. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Any questions from members? No. So we're happy to note the position with the existing improvement plan 2022-23. Consider adopting the refresh plan for next year 23-24 and agree any additional actions or activities be included in the proposed new improvement plan. So done that. Excellent. Item 11, forward plan arrangements. Again, over to you, Stephen.
Okay, thank you. So since the last meeting, we've had to bring forward the December meeting to the 1st of December to ensure there's no clash with, I think it's the Regional Economic Partnership. So that's now in place. But following some of the discussion and requests today, there's obviously the draft items of business within the appendix, but there's a couple of key things that come up in terms of the deferral of the workforce summit information and more detail required around the 10,000 voices follow-up, etc. So there's a few things for today. I have to rejig the proposed business and make sure that's up to date. But I can take care of that behind the scenes. Yeah. Thank you.
No, that's very helpful, Stephen. And I think we did have a conversation at the beginning of this meeting when we were having technical glitches around venue and hybrid working and people coming in person or not, and not really knowing numbers of people in person, which makes it a wee bit more difficult to determine where we're going to host the meeting. So I think Steve and myself and Nick need to have a bit of a discussion around where we hold it, whether person or, so we'll take that away as well. That would be really helpful. Good. No other comments from members? So that's the last item on the agenda. Thank you very much. Just before I close the meeting, most of you will already know that this is Richard's last meeting of the Community Planning Partnership Board before he heads off to pastures new. And I just want to thank Richard on behalf of the board for your invaluable support and input. I only came onto this about a year ago, and even in that space and time, I can see a huge improvement in the way that the board is operating, and I know that a lot of that has been driven by yourself with Stephen's support, so thank you on behalf of the board. Richard's been with the council for 23 years. I've worked with him for 16 plus years, and I'll be very sorry to see him go. He's been a tremendous colleague, and I've always very much valued his input as a colleague, but also as a friend, so on a personal level as well. Haste ye back, Richard. Haste ye back. So, sorry.
Thanks very much, Chair. We really appreciate your kind words. I'd also just like to say thank you to the partners out with the council in the room who've helped and supported me over the past 2 or 3 years on this journey in terms of community planning, and really appreciate their help and support and guidance as well. But really appreciate your kind words. Looking forward to a new challenge, and yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Richard. So with that, I've got no further business, and we've finished 3 minutes early. Amazingly. Amazingly. So thank you all for your participation. Enjoy your weekend when it comes, and we'll see you in December. Thank you.